today's episode of Party Like a Marketer, the podcast dedicated to cannabis marketing, public relations, and authentic storytelling, sponsored by the Cannabis Marketing Association. I'm your host, Lisa Buffo, the founder and CEO of Cannabis Marketing Association. Follow us on social media at Canna Marketing. We're on LinkedIn, and sign up for our newsletter for cannabis marketing tips. We are kicking off season 4 of the podcast, and I've learned a lot since we started. We're going to be talking more about business building in context to marketing this season. A lot of us are building the ship as we cross the ocean, and understanding what resources we have up front is important context to the marketing conversation. I'm also excited to announce in the coming weeks the dates for our June Cannabis Marketing Summit in Denver, as well as the launch of our awards program, with the ceremony held at the summit. So let's jump into this week's guest. I'm talking with Jeremy Johnson, the Business Development Manager at Dispense. Jeremy is a digital marketing professional that has fully transitioned into the cannabis space after a wide range of projects, leading from mobile and web development teams to managing tech installations for music festivals and large-scale events. Cannabis has always been a part of his journey as a second-generation advocate and medical card holder at an early age. From 2020 to 2022, Jeremy helped lead the e-commerce and digital strategies for 2 of Michigan's highest volume dispensaries. And after a decade-long career in the digital world, Jeremy is now helping educate cannabis retailers on how to use e-commerce tools to increase brand awareness, grow web traffic, and increase sales in the fastest growing channel for the cannabis industry. I'm your host, Lisa Buffo, and today's guest is Jeremy Johnson. Jeremy, thank you so much for being in here and joining us on the show today.
Thank you. It's always fun.
Nice. So, Jeremy, can you give our audience a little bit of background on who you are, what you do, and how you got started in cannabis?
Yeah, definitely. So currently I work for a ancillary company in the space. We focus on e-commerce and order management for retailers. So the company is called Dispense, and we build online menus, kiosk menus, anything digital for retailers to help them sell cannabis online or in store through different digital channels. That's my current focus, and that's also like kind of my background previous to cannabis. I was involved in the digital space, building websites and mobile apps through agency work. So I built like hundreds of different websites and probably close to 50 different mobile apps over like 15 years. And that's where like cannabis and technology kind of intersect for me. But previous to that, in the cannabis space, I've been involved for a long time. Kind of was like born into it, but then I was lucky that I am from Michigan. So in 2008, we passed the caregiver bill, and I happened to just be turning 18. So I got my caregiver card right away, and got started as a caregiver and did that for about 10 years. But also had the opportunity to see the industry in California during that time, as well as Oregon. I got to vote on 3 different recreational bills: California, Oregon, and Michigan. So that's like a fun fact. It was a good time. And then when Michigan was finally going legal in 2018, I kind of moved back to Michigan full time and focused on that and helped open the first recreational dispensary chain in the Upper Peninsula. So they opened the first store, and then I kind of got involved on the second store. And as we got going, the pandemic set in pretty quickly. Our first store opened in like November of 2019, I think it was. And then I started kind of working on the digital side, and all of a sudden everything switched to online orders. So that was kind of like the light bulb moment for me, where I was like, I can take my past experience and apply it to cannabis, and do some really cool stuff with it. So spent about 2 years working for that company, and then a few months working for 315, one of the largest non-vertically integrated retailers in the state of Michigan. But then it just made sense to go and help build a better e-commerce platform, because this is a new industry and I felt like a lot of the tools were lacking, and that's where we are now.
So did you, when you said you were building those websites and mobile apps, do you have a dev background?
Originally I do. Uh, I taught myself like pretty early on how to program, just with like Age of Empires, Warcraft. I was
Nice.
modding anything I could. But and I started, I got about halfway through like a technical degree in college, but then I kind of realized, and cannabis was probably part of this journey, in college. Like I was like, I don't want to sit behind a computer my whole life. Like I want to be out doing stuff and like talking and socializing. So I dropped out of my program. But when I graduated, I graduated with a communications degree in rhetorical communication, which like not a whole lot of jobs. I was studying like propaganda and social movements, so not a whole lot of jobs in that. But because of my technical background, I was able to get a job in the development space. But I quickly kind of positioned myself to be more of a project and product manager, so that I wasn't having to do all the code myself and could still like work on fun things and have an impact, but not be glued to my keyboard.
And tell me a little bit about Dispense and how, so it sounds like you've worked with a lot of startups, which is what most of us do in this space. It's a startup industry. Almost all of our businesses are startups, depending on how you look at it, but that you've got some deep experience there. Tell me about Dispense's story and your role there.
Yeah. So Dispense was started like early 2020, and it was started by Kyla Sierney and Tim Officer, who they had a previous startup that's still in existence called Tablist, and it was in the hospitality space. If you're familiar, or if you're not familiar, they did like booking is kind of like Open Table, but for like bars and clubs. So it's like digital online bookings for private spot at a club and bottle service and all that kind of stuff. And so through that business, they were connected with Abner, who is or was the founder and CEO of Ascend Wellness. And once the pandemic set in, obviously the hospitality industry took a huge dive. And so their business was kind of non-existent at that point. Nobody was open. But at the same time, cannabis was exploding. And so Ascend had this store in Illinois that was right on the border of St. Louis that was just crazy busy, doing thousands of orders a day. And they didn't have the technology to keep up with all those orders. And so Abner called Kyla and was like, hey, I need help. I need an order management system. And that was the first iteration. The first iteration of Dispense actually sat on top of another e-commerce platform. And all it did was help to manage orders from like a time slot perspective. But then, they quickly realized that a lot of the stuff they built for Tablist could transfer to cannabis. So that's how it evolved into more of a full order management system with a focus on e-commerce.
And so you said it started March, early 2020. Was that like pre-pandemic, right when it started, or
Right when it started,
because of it?
because of it. Yeah, because all the different states were putting in restrictions. So like you couldn't shop in store. And
Yeah.
so really you had to shop online, but then it just made it a mess for like, how do you control the flow? And like this store and this Ascend store, like people were driving, it was so busy. People were driving across the border. They had to buy a parking lot. And so people were parking in this parking lot, and then they had buses that were busing people to the store.
Like a music
Like,
festival. Yeah.
yeah, that's how crazy it was. That's how busy it was. And everybody had to make the pre-orders online. So it was like you'd park at the parking lot, you'd get on the bus, you drive to the store, you pick up your order, you get back on the bus, you go back to your car.
Nice. Okay. So, I do want to talk about your approach to marketing and your philosophy, but I want to ask too about how resourced your company is. A lot of our listeners, we haven't really talked about it in the podcast yet, but a lot of marketers in this space are highly under resourced as far as funding, team, whatever, what have you. So where did Dispense get funding? If you don't mind me asking, and how much resources go towards marketing? And then we'll get into strategy a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And I kind of skipped over one of the second part of your last question, but like I got involved with Dispense right after their first round of funding. I had spent about 3 years working in recreational cannabis, focused on e-commerce, kind of a little bit pre-pandemic, but then mostly post-pandemic. Started in like 2019-ish. And I got introduced to Kylo like right after they had raised their first round. And that's kind of how we met and how we ended up working together. But Dispense raised about $2.5 million in the, let's say like fall of 2020, it must have been. Or maybe it was 2021. I don't know. Dates are, I don't know, post-pandemic stuff, but either way, that first round was obviously a lot smaller than like some of the other companies in this space. It was led by Poseidon, who is one of the original cannabis investors. So that was really cool, and one of the things that attracted me to the company. But then it also had backing from like a lot of mainstream investment companies, like NextView, who that's the venture capitalist firm of the founder of LinkedIn, for example. So it was really interesting to see a cannabis technology company that didn't just have purely cannabis investors. And that was like another thing that was really attractive to me personally when I was looking at different platforms and where I wanted to be at. But yeah, so we raised 2.5 million, which is nothing to like, that's a substantial amount, but we didn't raise like hundreds of millions like a lot of these other people. So that does kind of keep us resource constrained. At this point, we're like a team of 14 or 15 people now. And not a ton of the budget goes to marketing. We have one full-time marketing person, and then there's, maybe 2 or 3 of us that, including myself, that kind of dedicate part-time resources to marketing. So I from a marketing perspective, I wish we would do more of it, but like we have to be conscious of how we grow, and most of our resources are dedicated to engineering and support right now, because if we don't have the product to back up the marketing, what's the point?
Yeah, and I think, thank you for sharing that. There's something to be said about being a little bit constrained, because it forces you to learn, it forces you to be scrappy, it forces you to really test and test on a smaller scale, so that when you do get more money and the time is right, or resources, you're able to make some conscious decisions. And I think you can kind of build that into the culture when you start, small, but grow conscientiously. That can really serve you in the long term. But that definitely makes sense from a tech perspective, as far as, how much just goes into building the product and making sure you've got something functional that you can sell in the first place.
Yeah. And we started behind too, like some of the other e-commerce companies in the space got their start in like, I think like 2018 or 2019. So they had like a year to 2 years head start on us. So we've definitely had to put that focus on product first.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your approach to marketing. And we could you could answer this either as Jeremy or on behalf of Dispense, because I know you're also a marketer too, even if it's not necessarily all of your day to day. Do you have a marketing philosophy or strategy that you stay true to?
So from like a theoretical standpoint, a lot of my, like, I didn't like go to, like, I didn't graduate with like a marketing degree or anything.
Neither did I, by the way.
What's that?
Neither did I, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know. The marketing degree, like the marketing program at my university just wasn't really attractive, but at least to me, like it didn't grab my interest. But like my background is in communications, like which marketing communications, lots of overlap there. But like specifically, I mentioned earlier, like propaganda and social movements, and like a lot of that is like, I specifically like I studied like World War II a lot, and like so much of that is like, how do you create a message and distill it down, in a form that can be like easily understood, but then a message that you can like blast out to multiple channels, and that you have to be able to tweak that message for each different channel that you're using for it to truly be effective. So like for me, I really think about marketing as propaganda, which like a lot maybe has a negative connotation for some people, but like propaganda is neutral. It can be positive or negative, and it's just how you choose to utilize it. So that's like my personal background. When it comes to business, like I really believe in more like product-led marketing strategies, and letting the product speak for itself. And then also I think for if I was if I was a studied marketer, I think the correct terminology is like demand generation. So like with Dispense, just as a concrete example, one of the things that was missing in cannabis e-commerce when we got started was the ability to leverage product data for SEO. And so like for the first like year, I mean, and I still focus on this a lot, like you'll hear me talk about it all the time, but for like the first year, we were just building out the ability to leverage your product data for SEO. And when we launched that product, so much of what I talked about, so much of what we talked about as a company was just focused on like, hey, here's what you don't have access, here's what you're missing out on, here's what you don't have access to right now if you're using an iframe menu, and here's what you could be doing if you were using technology that allowed you to drive SEO traffic. And so it was just like, in a way, it was like education, because a lot of people didn't even know the traffic they were missing out on, and subsequently the revenue. But I think that's like, for me, that's the most effective thing. It's like demand generation as well as education mixed in, and just being open about what your product can do and how you're doing it.
That makes sense. And I know I was going to say, so just to make sure everyone understands that, can you just talk about the difference between what an iframe is and product-based SEO?
Yeah, well, so that's like,
I know they're not like two separate
not
things,
quite the same. Yeah. So like most online menus, and this is like, it's kind of funny how this happened, but like online menus in cannabis weren't really a thing until the pandemic, right? So like there were a couple players in the space that had built out MVPs of online menus, so minimum viable products. And to do that, like one of the easiest ways to do that is to just do it with an iframe. Iframes are like 25-year-old technology, but they're like simple to get up and running. And so when the pandemic hit, there wasn't any infrastructure for this stuff on like a more robust scale. So then all of a sudden, iframes were deployed across thousands of dispensary websites. The issue with iframes, there's many, but I mean, there's security issues, there's speed issues, but then most importantly, from like a SEO standpoint, Google has a really hard time crawling and indexing content inside of iframes. So all these dispensaries out there are hosting a menu, but then if you were to search for a brand, category, or a strain, none of your dispensary isn't showing up in Google. Instead, what's showing up is like one of the marketplaces, whether it's Dutchy or Weed Maps or Leafly or anything like that. So there's iframe-based menus, which is like, I guess the technique or like technical term for like the container would be like embedded style menus, but then there's native style menus. So native menus are built into your website. They're a part of your website. Every page is, has a unique URL, and that content is fully indexable and crawlable by Google. And that's what allows you to show up when somebody searches for like, where can I get some Jeter pre-rolls near me? And that's as a retailer, that's what you want. If somebody's looking for that product and you carry that product, you want them to be able to just find you instantly through Google, because at the end of the day, Google is the largest marketplace. So hopefully from a technical perspective, that clears it up a little bit.
Yeah. So when you're talking about product-led marketing, there's in general, excuse me, for technology, you obviously want to build a good product that speaks for itself and your customers are going to be happy with, but also as far as your specific vertical and the product that Dispense is building, there is this almost inherent benefit to your customers because they have control of that technology and they can use SEO and in this use case for the products to be able to rank and be found and increase their revenue. So there's kind of two sides to that, but they do work together.
Yeah, and I've like product-led SEO is like a real industry term in the SEO space, and it's like using SEO as a strategy, but focused on your product. And it mostly comes from the B2B space, actually. But I kind of co-opted the term for cannabis, but I tweaked it a little bit. So I call it product-based SEO, because for cannabis retailers, their product is, the actual, it's B2C. And so it's the actual thing that people are buying. So when I say like product-based SEO, I'm talking about SEO revolving around categories. So things like pre-rolls versus flower, and then brands. So like a Jeter, Wana, Wild, and then strains too. People don't realize it, but there's about 12 million searches per month just for cannabis strains on Google. So there's just
worldwide or in the US?
In the US. I think no, that's just US. That doesn't include Canada. That's just US numbers.
Yeah, that's enormous.
Yeah, it's crazy how many people are searching for cannabis strains. And like the more mature a market gets, at first you might just be searching for like, what's the closest dispensary to me? But then the more mature a market gets, you can see those searches change to be more like brand loyal, or strain specific. So people really want to know like, where can I get some Pineapple Express at, the more they know. So there's a large part of education with it too.
Yeah, and we've seen, at least on the CMA side, that backed up by other data as far as what consumers are asking for and what they're looking for on the, like, not just from an SEO side, but like consumer research and market research is showing too that there actually is really high brand loyalty in mature markets in cannabis. So for newer markets, it is something to pay attention to because that is just how consumer behavior is going to change. And to just give another example, like, if I'm searching for clothes, I might say like conference outfit, in Denver, or, red shoes near me. And that's the same thing as far as they search specifically as far as what they're looking for than versus sometimes but within that retailer. So that makes a lot of sense that it's happening in cannabis and that retailers and brands should pay attention to that, but it comes down to the core technology ultimately.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's not like if you're looking for clothes there's so many examples, but like if you're looking for a particular style of clothes, you're probably not going to search for like the Target nearest to you. You're going to search for like you said, like formal clothes or conference clothes. And then if Target happens to have it, sure, you'll go to Target, but you want to know that Target has it first. And same thing with dispensaries. Like I got 3 dispensaries within a mile of me, but I don't want to go to that dispensary if they don't have the product I'm looking for. So I'm going to go online first, figure out which dispensary has it, and then go to that one.
Yeah. That makes sense. So what are your favorite marketing tools? Are there any specific platforms or resources that you recommend?
Yeah. For me, my favorite marketing tools are analytical based. So there's this like concept, like if I've got an hour to solve a problem, I'm going to spend 55 minutes researching that problem and then 5 minutes like executing and solving it. And so like when I'm talking digital marketing, usually the tool that I live in is Google Analytics, Google Search Console, and then a number of third-party tools like SEMrush. SEMrush is probably the one that I use the most. But I mean, my mornings start by just like opening up all of my analytical tools and like going through the data for the last week or the previous day and like seeing if there's like unusual spikes on a certain thing and just like trying to understand what is going on from a consumer standpoint, whether it's at the retail level or on the B2B side. And so I'm constantly like kind of switching mindsets between B2B marketing and B2C marketing, but regardless, I'm still in like those analytical platforms first and foremost.
And Google, so SEMrush isn't free, but Google Analytics and Google Search Console are. You just need to install them and have them on your site. And you can also, if you have a CRM, like we use HubSpot, you can have them connect and sort of directly embed to, so you can have a dashboard of that information. But I know Google has made some changes to analytics recently, but just want to let everyone know, if you don't already have those set up, that you can just do that.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I will say too, as a retailer, like going back to the actual technology, like when I was on the retail side, and I still see this when I'm working with retail clients, but that iframe technology, again, like really difficult for Google to crawl it and index it properly, because they're not individual pages, you're just reloading content in it. So when I was working on the retail side, like I would go into Google Analytics and I would look at my conversion rate, but then I would double check those numbers, right? So I would see like, oh, my conversion rate is 20%, but then I'd be like, wait a minute, Google's telling me I only had 300 orders today. But then I go into my e-commerce platform and I had 500 orders, or, however many orders. And I'm like, not all, because of that iframe technology, not all of my orders were being able to be read by Google. So that's like another really important thing when you're building out your tech stack, is to make sure that the tools you're using are compatible with everything else. Because when I was first started looking at that data, I was only seeing about 30% of the actual data. I was missing 70%. So I was trying to make decisions based on a minority of the data, which actually led me to making some bad decisions until I realized what was going on there.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother conversation we could have about data ownership and what that means and how to implement that. But yeah, Google Analytics, SEMrush, Google Search Console, those are all good to know. So I want to talk a little bit about some successes and failures. So to the point of, working at any early stage company, and, certainly in cannabis tech. And as a marketer, we go through both of those. Maybe first, do you want to share a success story with us? An initiative you tried or something you did that worked?
Yeah. I think one of the coolest things that I've got to do recently, a few years ago, was where I'm at in Michigan. We border the state of Wisconsin. And we rolled out when I was working on the retail side, I helped to roll out the first out-of-home advertising campaign for cannabis in the entire state of Wisconsin, because there are no dispensaries there, but we're right on the border. And so we put up, I think initially we put up like 5 billboards, kind of on the main highway leading from Wisconsin to Michigan. And then we also utilized
as a retailer.
Yeah, as a retailer. Yeah,
they let you do that.
Yeah. So it was really I had to call so many people, and like your big out of home advertisers wouldn't touch it, Outfront and Lamar, like they're like, no, we're not doing it. But the state of Wisconsin doesn't actually have any laws against advertising cannabis. And so like it just took me finding the right partners and like talking to usually smaller media owners to be able to make this happen. And I actually had to help rewrite a lot of internal policies for these companies, because it wasn't state law that was preventing them from doing it. It was their own internal policies. So like we worked with their lawyers and our lawyers to like go through this. And it took about like a year to launch the first campaign. And we were literally the first cannabis company to advertise in Wisconsin. And so, you know, we started with the 5 billboards, but then we also worked with a network of advertisers at restaurants, bars, and like venues, so like sports arenas and stuff. So we like, we're not too far away from Green Bay, Wisconsin. So we had screens in the bathrooms at every bar surrounding Lambeau. You know, like people would go to these Packer games and tailgate. I would literally get
football stadium.
football set, yeah.
Okay.
Green Bay Packers, yeah. So I like, and we're pretty close, and I've got a lot of friends in Wisconsin. So like the weekend of a Packers game, like I would literally get text messages from friends in Wisconsin, like in the back of sending me photos of like the ads in the bathrooms. I'm like, I don't need to see that, but thank you, like really cool. And so that was like awesome to see. And then there was even like when I really knew that it was like working and effective, there was a kid from Wisconsin that came up to visit, and he tattooed the logo of the company I was working for on his like ankle. And he was like, I just want to show this to you guys. Like, I saw one of your billboards. Like, he's like, I'm a stoner. I love weed. Like, but we don't have it in Wisconsin. He's like, I come up here like once a month now. Like, this is how much I love you guys. And I was like, that is effective marketing. Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that was probably one of the in marketing, that was probably one of the coolest things that I've got to be a part of.
Yeah, I would say any campaign that would actually get someone to execute on a tattoo unsolicited is like a huge win.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
we hooked him up. He got some free practice.
Yeah, that totally seems worthy. That's exciting. It's good to hear that there are ways to get things done, and interesting how you approached it in Wisconsin where there was actually no rules stating no, and you still figured out how to get around that and do it completely compliantly. And one of the things I do love about marketing in this space is it does require that creativity and a little bit of that artistry, because in this space, these things haven't been done before. So you do come up against that internal resistance, but that's awesome.
And those billboards are still up today. Like,
they are.
You know, a lot of people are like, oh, how long did you get away with that for? I'm like, we didn't get away with anything. Those boards are still up. We're good.
And that store, I'm guessing, is still doing great.
Yeah, those stores are some of the highest volume stores. That chain is one of the highest volume chains in the entire state still to this day.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great. So conversely, do you want to talk about any failures, any marketing things you've tried that maybe didn't work out as well, and what you learned from them?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's hard to fail at marketing because you're always learning, right?
For sure.
But I think like one of the more amusing stories I have is like I started college in 2007, and Facebook was becoming like a pretty big thing at that point, and it was like one of the first digital channels where like you could all of a sudden reach like entire groups, like specific groups, and specifically college, right? And so they were pretty popular. They'd been around for a minute, and they started rolling out their advertising platform. And I was like, I'm going to teach myself how to do Facebook ads. So I created a couple of accounts, and I messed around with it, and I like started to get some random Facebook pages with likes and stuff. But like, I wanted to like do it for something, like I wanted to like actually do it for something real. And so I had a friend at the time that was making music. And I was like, let me see how many people I can like get to like his page with like a little campaign. And I set up a campaign that was like, I don't know, like a max of like $15 a day or something like that. And I ran it, and it started to work. And I was like, cool, this is awesome. Like, it's fun. But I thought I turned the campaign off. I did not turn the campaign off, and I ended up spending like $1,500 as like a 18-year-old kid, advertising my friend's like music career. And I didn't have a lot of money, so $1,500 was like the only reason I knew about it is because I overdrafted my bank account.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is taking all my money? So that was like, that really hurt, and I learned a lot. That being said, like over the next 3 years, like my friend, he got to open for Bone Thugs and Harmony. He got to play all these big shows, like local, as a local opener, he got to open for all these big artists coming to town. Ying Yang Twins, that was another one.
Yeah.
But like it was a failure. I lost a lot of money, but I had a lot of good times.
Good to learn that young, and that it did help your friend. That's a good story.
Yeah. Pay attention to your budgets is the moral of the story there.
Yeah, they can. I've had a similar story with LinkedIn. They can totally sneak up on you if you're not really clear about the parameters on how much to spend, and you got to really watch it, because it'll happen. That money will get eaten up really fast.
Yeah.
So what would be, and thank you for sharing that story, but what would be your best advice to cannabis marketers right now?
I think this goes back to like the success story and like talking about Wisconsin, but it's like, my best advice would be to don't let people tell you what you can and can't do. Like do the research for yourself, because I've talked to probably 22 dozen people that told me no for advertising in Wisconsin before I found the person that was like, tell me more. Like, can we do this? Let's find out. And I still think that's like very pervasive in our industry. Like so many people think they can't do things. It's like, oh, I can't advertise on social media, or I can't use Google ads, or it's always, I can't do this, and this, but what can you do? And if you think you can't do something, ask why. Because usually there's a way to do it. I remember when I was on the retail side, I remember getting calls from different like advertising platforms, and they'd be like, hey, like, whether it was digital ads or like publication ads, they'd be like, hey, we work with cannabis, we want to sell you some ads. And I'd be like, cool, what do you got in Wisconsin? And they'd be like, oh, well, we can't advertise in Wisconsin because it's illegal. And I'm like, okay, then I'm not interested. I wasn't going to let them tell me where I could and couldn't advertise. And then a lot of those times, a month or two down the road, I would get a call back and they'd be like, so we looked into it and we'll advertise in Wisconsin with you now. And I'm like, cool. Now I'll do business with you.
Nice. Yeah, that's very true. And I think it is, when someone tells you no, it's just another opportunity to keep opening doors and find that person who's going to tell you yes. And to do your research.
Like,
and what?
And to make an impact. Like if those people are telling you no, they've told everybody else no too. So if you can find a way to make it happen, that's going to stand out. If everybody's doing the same thing and you find a way to do something different, like people are going to pay attention to that.
Yeah, very much so. Awesome. Well, anything else you want to share, Jeremy, before we wrap about cannabis marketing, or any thoughts you have for the audience who's looking to help grow their business?
Yeah. I think in general, like it's just a fun space to be in because it's so new, and like we're still writing the playbook. Like there is no playbook for cannabis marketing. We can borrow from other industries and we can learn, like take lessons from other spaces, but like we get to make it up. And it's very rare to have that kind of opportunity. And on like a even larger level, like this is a space where we're having real impact in people's lives. And like, again, like how many opportunities do you get to do that in your professional life? And like in general, cannabis is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We're not legalizing this thing any other time in the history of the United States. Like it's now, and we're making history. So if you're interested, like, go for it, because you're never going to have another chance.
And do you have any contact information, maybe a website you want to share with the audience, or social handles?
Yeah, if you're interested, like if you're a retailer and you're looking for online menus and digital ordering platforms, dispenseapp.com. If you're just looking to find me, LinkedIn is the best place. Jeremy Johnson on LinkedIn. I don't think LinkedIn has like tags, but it's not like there's like a million other people with the last name of Johnson on LinkedIn.
We'll link it in the show description on our website.
Yeah, you'll find me on there. I'm the one with a joint in my profile picture, so you'll figure it out.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I appreciate you taking the time to come on the show and share your stories with us.
Yeah, thank you. CMA is, I think, a really cool organization in the space, and I appreciate all you guys do, and I think we need more of that. And it's just cool to have an outlet for like that's specific to our industry, especially as such a new industry. Sometimes it can be hard to find community, and I think you guys do a really good job of it with your podcast, your Slack channels that you guys have for people, and then the in-person events too. It's fun to like find your little niche.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's much needed. It's not, the space isn't easy, and community does make it a lot better, particularly when you can share stories like this and learn from each other. I think that's, the best way forward. So
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week.
Bye.